It was just another busy night at Joe's roadside diner. The neon sign buzzed against the quiet Texas night, casting a dull red glow over the parking lot. Inside, the scent of sizzling meat filled the air, mingling with the warm aroma of grilled onions and melted cheese. Customers sat at their usual booths, laughing, chatting, blissfully unaware of the nightmare lurking just beyond the kitchen doors. At the heart of it all stood Joseph "Joe" Gibson, the proud owner, the master chef, the man behind the grill. His hands worked quickly, flipping patties, pressing them onto the hot iron with a practiced touch. To his customers he was a genius, a legend. People traveled miles just to get a taste of his infamous chef's special burger. They said it was unlike anything they had ever eaten before, juicy, rich, unforgettable. But none of them ever questioned what made it so unique. Because the truth was unthinkable. The truth was horrifying. What if I told you that the burger sizzling on the grill wasn't beef, or pork, or any kind of meat you'd ever find in a butcher shop? What if I told you that the man smiling behind the counter, the man handing out plates and shaking hands, was hiding a monstrous secret? Some secrets are buried deep. Others? They're served on a plate, with a side of fries. 4 years Joe Gibson got away with murder, literally. He was a chef, and a butcher. But his cuts of meat didn't come from animals. No, Joe had a different kind of livestock. And when his own wife, Mary Gibson, finally uncovered his gruesome secret, she knew she had to put an end to it. But she made one fatal mistake. She let him know. On a cold Texas night, standing alone in the parking lot of the diner, Mary Gibson gripped her phone, whispering into the receiver. Her voice shook as she told the person on the other end what she had discovered. That her husband, the man she had loved and trusted, was feeding people something unimaginable. She planned to expose him. She planned to run. But she never got the chance. A shadow loomed behind her. A voice calm, too calm. "Mary, who are you talking to?" By the time the truth was uncovered, it was already too late. When investigators, led by Detective Ray Dawson, finally stepped into that kitchen, they found more than just knives and grills. They found something wrapped in plastic hidden away in the freezer. A slab of meat, carefully packaged and labeled for the next day's special. But this wasn't just any cut of meat. This one had a name. Mary Gibson. The Texas killer chef. His secret recipe wasn't just twisted, it was deadly. In the heart of rural Texas, where the highways stretched long and lonely, Joe's roadside diner stood like an oasis for weary travelers. The sign out front, with its flickering red neon letters, promised the best burgers in Texas. And for many who stopped by, that promise rang true. The burgers were juicy, the flavors rich, and the prices just right. But what no one knew, what no one could even imagine, was the dark secret hidden behind the swinging doors of Joe's kitchen. Joseph "Joe" Gibson wasn't just a chef, he was an artist, a man obsessed with his craft. He took pride in every burger that left his kitchen, every bite that sent a customer into a state of blissful satisfaction. But his obsession wasn't with cooking alone. No, Joe's fascination ran deeper, into something sinister, something inhuman. It started small. A mistake. An accident, perhaps. Or maybe, fate. Joe's diner wasn't always successful. In the early years it struggled. The competition was fierce and people in town were loyal to the bigger franchises. The bills piled up. The customers weren't coming. Joe felt his dreams slipping through his fingers. Then one night an opportunity presented itself. A drifter, a man with no name, no family, wandered into the diner after closing hours. He was hungry, desperate. He begged for food, offering to work for a meal. Joe, already on edge from his failing business, saw something in the man's eyes, something pathetic, something weak. No one would miss him. And so Joe made a decision. A decision that would change everything. The knife was quick. The cleanup methodical. And when Joe looked at the fresh meat before him, something clicked. He had butchered plenty of animals before. This was no different. That night, the chef's special was born. The next morning, the diner saw an unusual rush of customers. The burgers were juicier, the flavor deeper, unlike anything anyone had ever tasted. People raved about them, spreading the word. Joe had done it, he had found the secret to success. But success came at a cost. A terrible, unspeakable cost. One body turned into two. Two turned into four. And soon Joe had perfected his methods. He was careful. Selective. He targeted those who wouldn't be missed. Drifters, hitchhikers, the lost souls who wandered Texas highways. He had an eye for it now. He could tell just by looking who had no family waiting for them, who had no friends to ask questions. His wife, Mary Gibson, never suspected at first. She believed in him, believed in his dream. But over the years she started to notice things. The long nights spent in the kitchen even when the diner was closed. The odd shipments, or rather the lack of shipments, from their usual meat supplier. The way Joe always insisted on grinding his own meat, never letting anyone else touch it. And then there were the disappearances. People who had stopped at the diner, people she had served, only for them to never be seen again. Joe, why are people asking about missing travelers? Some of them came here, didn't they? Mary's voice was cautious but firm. She needed an answer. Joe would smile. That easy, charming smile that had won her heart so many years ago. Mary, sweetheart, people go missing all the time. It's a big state. And for a while that was enough. But Mary couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So one night, while Joe was out on a supply run, she did what she never dared to before. She went into the back storage room. The moment she opened the door, the stench hit her first. A sickly sweet, metallic scent. Her stomach turned as she stepped inside, her fingers trembling as they flicked on the light. And there in the freezer, she saw them. Packages. Neatly wrapped. Labeled not with standard butcher cuts but with names. Daniel. Louis. Michael. Her breath hitched. Her mind screamed at her to run, to leave, to pretend she never saw it. But before she could take a step back, she heard the front door creak open. Joe was home. When Joe found Mary in the storage room, she was frozen, her wide eyes locked on the horror before her. For the first time in years, Joe saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. Fear. Mary? His voice was soft, almost apologetic. I was hoping you'd never see this. Her breath came in sharp gasps. Oh my God, Joe, what have you done? He took a step closer. I did what I had to do. This place? This diner? It's ours, Mary. And now it's successful. Because of me. Tears welled in her eyes. Because of this? She pointed a shaking finger at the freezer. This is murder, Joe. He sighed, rubbing his temples like she was simply being difficult. You don't understand. You've never understood. This isn't murder, Mary. It's business. She shook her head, stepping back. I won't let you do this anymore. I swear to God, Joe, I'll tell the police. For the first time his easy smile faded. A darkness settled in his eyes, something Mary had never seen before. He tilted his head, studying her like one of his cuts of meat. I can't let you do that, sweetheart. Mary knew then, there was no going back. The man she had married, the man she had once loved, was gone. In his place stood a monster in a chef's uniform, a butcher disguised as a businessman. She had to get out. She had to run. But she also knew. Joe wouldn't let her leave alive. And so, the game of cat and mouse began. A wife who knew too much. A husband who had spent years perfecting the art of making people disappear. The only question left was, who would be the next chef's special? For years, Mary Gibson lived in blissful ignorance. She had always believed in her husband, Joseph Joe Gibson, the man she married, the man who dreamed of making his little roadside diner a success. They had built this life together, side by side, and despite the long hours and late nights, she never questioned Joe's dedication. If anything, she admired it. But admiration had a way of turning into suspicion. And suspicion, when ignored for too long, had a way of becoming terror. The first time Mary felt something was off, it was subtle. Customers came and went all the time, truckers, drifters, travelers passing through. It was the nature of a roadside diner. But every now and then, she would overhear conversations that made her pause. Hey, whatever happened to that guy from last week? One regular asked another. The one who was hitchhiking through? Dunno. He said he was headed west, but I never saw him leave. That was the first time Mary noticed the pattern. Customers who arrived at the diner, sat at their booths, ate their meals, but were never seen again. At first she brushed it off. People traveled. People moved on. It wasn't unusual. But then there were the personal belongings. One evening, while cleaning up after closing, Mary found something beneath a booth, a wallet. She opened it, expecting to find a regular customer's ID, someone she could return it to. Instead, the face on the driver's license belonged to a man she had seen just days before. A man who had ordered a burger, thanked her kindly, and told her he was on his way to California. So why was his wallet still here? Mary took it to Joe. Someone left this behind, she said, watching his face carefully. Joe barely glanced at it. Throw it out. That was it. No concern. No curiosity. Just indifference. That was the first time Mary felt something cold coil in her stomach, an unease she couldn't explain. Running a diner wasn't easy, especially one as busy as Joe's had become. Meat deliveries were routine. Mary had seen them arrive for years, big trucks hauling fresh beef, boxes stacked in the freezer. But then at some point she noticed, they stopped. At first she assumed Joe had changed suppliers. But when she checked the invoices one afternoon, there was nothing. No orders placed in months. No receipts. No records of any meat deliveries at all. Yet somehow the burgers never ran out. That night as she lay in bed next to Joe, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. Mary had always respected Joe's space in the kitchen. It was his domain, his pride, the place where he created his so-called magic. But now it felt different. The kitchen no longer felt like just a kitchen. It felt like something was being hidden from her. One evening after Joe had left on a supply run, Mary made a decision. She had to look for herself. The storage room was always locked. Joe kept the key on him at all times. But Mary had lived with him long enough to know his habits. He always left his keys on the counter when he went out. Her fingers trembled as she picked them up, heart hammering in her chest. She felt like she was doing something forbidden. Something dangerous. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. The smell hit her first. A thick, metallic stench so strong it made her gag. She covered her mouth, forcing herself to step inside. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she flicked on the light. And there, in the cold, sterile glow of the fluorescent bulb, she saw the truth. The freezer door was slightly ajar. Inside, stacked neatly in rows, were large vacuum-sealed packages. But these weren't like the usual meat deliveries. These were different. The labels didn't read beef or pork. They had names. Mary's breath hitched as she read them. Daniel. Louis. Michael. Her vision blurred. Her body locked in place. Her mind screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. Her entire world had just shattered in an instant. Joe wasn't just feeding people. Joe was feeding people. The sound of the front door opening sent a jolt through Mary's body. Joe was back. She turned just as he stepped into the doorway, his eyes locking onto hers. His expression was unreadable, calm, almost eerily so. "Mary," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I was hoping you'd never see this." She staggered backward, heart pounding in her chest. "Oh my God. Joe, what have you done?" He sighed, stepping forward as if he were about to explain away a minor inconvenience. "I did what I had to do. This place? This diner? It's ours, Mary. And now it's successful. Because of me." Her hands clenched into fists. "Because of this? You've been, she couldn't even say it. The words caught in her throat like bile. Joe tilted his head. "Feeding people? Yes, Mary. I have. And guess what? They love it." Tears welled in her eyes. "This is murder, Joe." His face darkened. "No. This is business." Her breath came in sharp gasps. "I won't let you do this anymore. I swear to God, Joe, I'll tell the police." For the first time his easy smile faded. A darkness settled in his eyes, something Mary had never seen before. He studied her as if calculating something. Then he took a step forward. "I can't let you do that, sweetheart." Mary knew then, there was no going back. The man she had married, the man she had built a life with, was gone. In his place stood a monster in a chef's uniform, a butcher disguised as a businessman. And she was next on the menu. The walls of Joe's roadside diner had witnessed more than just the sizzle of meat and the laughter of satisfied customers. They had absorbed secrets, dark, unspeakable secrets that clung to every tile, every pan, every knife. And now those secrets had to be protected at all costs. Mary Gibson had seen too much. Her discovery had shattered the carefully constructed illusion that Joe had built. She knew what he was doing, knew what was in the meat freezer, knew the reason their customers always raved about this special ingredient in his burgers. But knowledge in this case was a death sentence. Joe had spent years perfecting his process. He had eliminated hitchhikers, drifters, nameless wanderers who wouldn't be missed. But Mary? She wasn't just another nameless traveler. She was his wife, his partner. And now she was his greatest threat. Mary backed away from Joe, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get out. Had to run. But Joe was already stepping forward, blocking the only exit. "Please, Joe," she whispered. "Don't do this." He let out a slow sigh, shaking his head. "Mary, you were never supposed to know." She turned to bolt past him, but he was faster. A flash of steel, a chef's knife in his hand, cut off her path. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even panicked. He was calm, as if he had already made his decision. "It has to be this way," Joe murmured. "You understand, don't you?" Mary's scream never had the chance to escape. The blade sliced through the air, catching her just beneath the ribs. Pain erupted through her body as she gasped, stumbling backward. Her hands grasped at the wound, warm blood soaking through her fingers. Joe caught her as she fell. Gently. Tenderly. "Shoo," he whispered, lowering her to the floor. "It's okay. I'll take care of everything." Joe moved quickly. He had done this before. Many times. He worked with precision, efficiency. He knew exactly how long he had before the body turned stiff, how quickly he needed to act before the blood settled. He couldn't afford to waste time. He dragged Mary's body into the back storage room, the same room where she had discovered his secret. The irony wasn't lost on him. He placed her on the stainless steel table, the same surface where he had butchered countless others before her. First, the bleeding had to be controlled. He reached for the industrial meat hooks hanging from the ceiling, securing them above the drainage pit. Then, with practiced ease, he hoisted her up, letting gravity do its work. The blood drained into the steel basin below, the deep crimson pooling like a dark, forbidden sauce. Joe watched the process unfold with detachment. He had long since abandoned the part of himself that once felt remorse. This wasn't personal. It was just another step in the process. Once the blood was drained, the real work began. Joe sharpened his knives, each stroke of the whetstone sending a whisper through the quiet room. A butcher's knife, a boning knife, a cleaver, each tool had a purpose. Each one played a role in transforming what was once human into something else. He started with the limbs. The joints were precise points of separation: shoulders, elbows, knees. A few well-placed cuts and they came apart with ease. The torso required more effort, but Joe had learned the most effective techniques over the years. A single deep incision down the abdomen, peeling back the flesh like a well-practiced chef preparing a pig for roasting. The hardest part, as always, was the face. He didn't like to look at them. Didn't like the way their eyes stared back even when lifeless. So he made quick work of it, removing anything that could be recognized. That was the only part that unsettled him, the remnants of identity. But once the body was reduced to its most basic elements, it was just meat. Joe prided himself on quality. He didn't just throw the meat onto a grill and call it a day. No, he treated it with care, with reverence. He knew how to tenderize it, how to season it just right. Customers always praised the richness of the flavor, the juiciness of the patty. If only they knew. The first step was grinding. The industrial meat grinder hummed to life as Joe fed in the freshly carved cuts. The muscle broke down into fine, pink strands, blending together seamlessly. He mixed it carefully, adding his signature blend of seasonings: garlic, salt, pepper, a touch of smoked paprika. The secret wasn't just in the meat, it was in the preparation. He shaped the patties by hand, pressing them firmly to ensure the perfect texture. Not too dense, not too loose. Just right. Then onto the grill. The sizzle was immediate. The smell intoxicating. It filled the air, masking any trace of what had happened just hours before. This was why people kept coming back. This was why they never questioned the taste. Each burger cooked to perfection, seared on the outside, tender and juicy on the inside. He toasted the buns, layering the patty with crisp lettuce, melted cheese, a generous dollop of his special sauce. A masterpiece. By the time the diner opened the next morning, the menu was set. The chef's special, a new blend, a fresh taste. And this time the customers would be eating something truly unique. Joe was meticulous. The remains, what little there was left, had to be disposed of properly. The bones were broken down, ground into dust. Anything unusable was burned in the industrial incinerator behind the diner, the flames licking away the last traces of what had once been his wife. By sunrise, there was nothing left of Mary Gibson except for the whispers of memory and the lingering scent of her meat sizzling on the grill. The customers came in as usual, oblivious. They ordered their food, complimented the flavor, left with full bellies and satisfied smiles. And Joe? He stood behind the counter, greeting them with the same warm smile he always had. As if nothing had changed. As if the woman he once loved wasn't now the very thing they were eating. For a while it seemed like Joe had gotten away with it. The diner ran as smoothly as ever, customers continued to flood in, and no one questioned a thing. Mary's absence was barely noticed, After all, she had always been the quieter one, the woman who kept to herself behind the counter. If anyone asked, Joe had a simple explanation ready: Mary decided to leave town for a while. Family issues. No one pressed further. No one suspected. At least not at first. It was a few weeks after Mary's disappearance when the first seeds of doubt began to sprout. One of the diner's longtime customers, an older trucker named Bill Hawkins, was the first to notice something was off. "Haven't seen Mary in a while, Joe," Bill said one evening, nursing his cup of black coffee at the counter. "She all right?" Joe barely missed a beat. "Yeah, she's visiting family back in Louisiana. Needed a break from the diner life." Bill nodded, but something about Joe's answer didn't sit right with him. Mary had never mentioned family in Louisiana. Hell, she barely ever left town. And then there was Joe himself. He seemed different. More distant. More on edge. He smiled like always, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well, tell her I said hi if you talk to her," Bill said, watching Joe closely. Joe simply nodded, turning away to flip a fresh batch of burgers on the grill. Conversation over. Mary might not have had many close friends, but she had Linda Martinez, a woman she had known since high school. And Linda wasn't buying Joe's story. After a week without hearing from Mary, Linda had called her phone, straight to voicemail. Then she drove by the diner hoping to see her working. But Mary was nowhere to be found. When Linda finally confronted Joe about it, his answers were vague, dismissive. "She's taking time off, Linda," Joe said, forcing a polite smile. "Needed some space." "Space from what?" Linda pressed. "Mary never mentioned wanting to leave. And she wouldn't just take off without telling me." Joe sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know how she was. Always keeping things bottled up. Look, I know you're worried, but she's fine. She'll be back when she's ready." But Linda wasn't convinced. Something was wrong. And she wasn't about to let it go. The real trouble started when Detective Ray Thompson entered the picture. Thompson had been with the local police force for over 2 decades, and he had seen his fair share of disappearances. He knew that when people left town voluntarily, they usually told someone. They packed bags. They withdrew money. They left behind some kind of trace. But Mary Gibson? She had simply vanished. No bank activity. No credit card use. No bus tickets. No goodbye messages. Nothing. That was enough to make Thompson pay Joe a visit. Joe was behind the counter when the detective walked in, his badge flashing as he slid into a booth. "Afternoon, Joe," he said casually. Joe wiped his hands on a towel and offered his usual easygoing grin. "Detective. What can I get you?" "Just coffee for now. And maybe some answers." Joe's grip on the towel tightened for just a second. "Oh? About what?" Thompson stirred his coffee slowly, watching Joe with a careful, unreadable gaze. "About your wife. Haven't seen her around lately." Joe let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "That's what this is about? Like I told a few folks, Mary's visiting family." Thompson took a sip. "Yeah, I heard that. Funny thing is, I checked around. No one seems to know anything about Mary's family. No records of any relatives in Louisiana. So I thought I'd come straight to the source." Joe's stomach tightened. He forced a laugh. "Detective, are you saying my wife being on vacation is some kind of crime?" "Not at all," Thompson said smoothly. "Just making sure she's all right." He set his cup down. "You see, Joe, people don't just disappear without a trace. No calls, no texts, no travel records. That's what worries me." Joe kept his face neutral, but inside his mind was racing. "Like I said, she needed a break. Maybe she doesn't want to be found right now." Thompson tilted his head slightly. "That so? Then I'm sure you wouldn't mind if I took a look around. Just routine, you understand." Joe's smile didn't falter, but his pulse quickened. "Detective, I run a clean business here. You're welcome to eat, but if you're looking for trouble, you won't find any." Thompson held his gaze for a long moment before finally leaning back. "Fair enough. But if you hear from Mary, tell her to give me a call." With that, he slid a business card across the counter and walked out. Joe didn't move for a long time. He stared at the card, his fingers twitching slightly. He knew this wasn't over. Word of Mary's disappearance spread quickly after the detective's visit. Linda became more vocal, telling people that something wasn't right. Bill Hawkins, the trucker, started sharing his suspicions. And soon, others began whispering. The town was small and rumors traveled fast. Joe knew it was only a matter of time before the police came back, this time with more than just questions. And if they searched too hard, they might find the one thing he couldn't let them see. The storage room. The freezer. The evidence. Joe had always prided himself on being careful. But he had underestimated one thing: how much people cared about Mary. And now the walls were closing in. His only option? Get rid of the last traces of her before they came knocking again. 4 weeks, Joe had managed to stay ahead of suspicion. He had played his part well, smiling, cooking, serving his customers the same way he always had. But no amount of charm or carefully crafted lies could stop what was coming. Detective Ray Thompson wasn't the kind of man who let go of a hunch. And the more he dug, the clearer it became: Mary Gibson hadn't left town. She had disappeared, and her husband was the last person to see her. The knock at the diner's back door came just as Joe was grinding fresh meat for the day's batch of burgers. He wiped his hands on his apron, his heart pounding as he stepped toward the door. He knew who it was before he even opened it. Detective Thompson stood on the other side, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Morning, Joe," the detective said, his voice even. "We've got a warrant to search the premises." Joe's stomach dropped, but he forced a casual smile. "A warrant? That seems a little excessive, don't you think?" Thompson didn't return the smile. "Step aside, Joe." Joe hesitated, but he knew there was no point in resisting. He stepped back, allowing them in. The officers moved quickly, spreading out through the diner, checking every room, every corner. Joe kept his breathing steady. They wouldn't find anything. He had been careful. He had cleaned everything. There was nothing left of Mary Gibson to be discovered. At least that's what he thought. It was Officer Reynolds who found it first, the industrial freezer in the storage room, padlocked shut. He called Thompson over, and together they forced it open. The moment the heavy lid lifted, a wave of sickly cold air filled the room. And then, the smell. Inside, wrapped in butcher paper, were neatly packaged cuts of meat. But just one, had come loose during the rush of the investigation. It had fallen to the side, revealing something that should never have been there. A human hand. Thompson's face remained unreadable as he reached in, peeling back the rest of the paper. The officers behind him let out sharp curses, one even gagging at the sight. Joe had been meticulous, but he had overlooked one detail, one damning, horrifying piece of evidence that tied him to Mary's disappearance. Her wedding ring still on her finger. The next few moments passed in a blur. The cold steel of handcuffs clicking shut around his wrists. The sound of Thompson reading him his rights. The flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the diner's windows as the town gathered outside, whispering, horrified. As Joe was let out, his customers, loyal patrons who had once praised his food, now stared at him with shock and disgust. And all Joe could do was smile one last time. Because deep down he knew. They had all already eaten the evidence. The town of Livingston, Texas, would never be the same. The small roadside diner that had once been a local favorite was now a crime scene, its doors locked, its kitchen forever tainted by the horrors that had unfolded behind closed doors. Joe Gibson, the once beloved chef, was now a monster in the eyes of the public. His arrest had sent shockwaves through the community. The news spread like wildfire: local papers, national headlines, true crime specials. The Texas killer chef. The man who had turned his own wife into a meal. Joe showed no remorse as he sat in court, clad in an orange jumpsuit, his hands shackled. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The forensic team had recovered more than just Mary's remains. DNA tests confirmed that traces of human tissue had been found in the diner's meat grinder. And that was enough to turn the entire case into a media circus. Prosecutors painted Joe as a cold, calculating predator, a man who had spent years feeding his customers the flesh of his victims. Witnesses were called: Mary's friend Linda Martinez, who had first sounded the alarm, Bill Hawkins, the trucker who had suspected something was wrong, and Detective Ray Thompson, whose relentless pursuit had brought Joe to justice. The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict: guilty on all counts, murder, desecration of a corpse, and crimes too gruesome to fathom. The judge wasted no time in handing down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the gavel struck, sealing his fate, Joe remained eerily calm. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He only smirked, as if he had known all along that it would end this way. Even with Joe locked away, Livingston struggled to move on. The people who had once dined at Joe's roadside diner could never erase the horrifying realization. Many of them had unknowingly consumed human flesh. The mere thought sent some into therapy. Others refused to speak of it, pretending it had never happened. The diner itself was abandoned, left to rot on the outskirts of town. No one dared to buy it. No one wanted to walk inside knowing what had once taken place there. Eventually the building was demolished, but the land remained untouched, forever cursed by its dark history. Linda Martinez, still haunted by the loss of her friend, became an advocate for missing persons, vowing never to ignore the signs again. Detective Ray Thompson moved on to other cases, but deep down he knew this was the one that would stay with him forever. And Joe? He spent his days in a maximum security prison, where he was no longer the man in charge, no longer the chef, no longer the one with the power. But even behind bars he never stopped smiling. Because no matter where he was, he knew one truth would always remain. They had all eaten his food. And no one could ever take that back. If you found this case as disturbing as we did, make sure to subscribe to the Family Crime Exposed for more shocking true crime stories. Hit that like button if you want more chilling tales, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. What do you think? Was Joe always a monster or did something push him over the edge? Let us know in the comments below.